Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our little Facebook Live experiment here. The four people you see on your screen right now are all educator performers at the Museum of Nature and Science. And we thought it'd be fun to give you a peek about what it's like behind the scenes. So we're out on the floor all day talking to people and sharing cool scientific knowledge. And inevitably, someone, often a small child, will ask a very bizarre question or tell us something we've never heard of before. And then when we reconnect behind the scenes over lunch or whatever, we get to have very interesting conversations about the weird things we've discovered. So my name is Mitch. I've been at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science for about 5 years. We have Ginny, who has a background in aerospace engineering.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, Ginny. We have Jean, who is a brilliant actor.
Hi, everybody.
And we have Andrew, who has been at the Museum of Nature and Science longer than the rest of us.
Hi, everyone.
And is also brilliant. I didn't say anything nice about you, Andrew.
Sorry. Oh, thank you.
So one thing the four of us have in common is that all of us sometimes put on an astronaut suit and go out on a diorama of the surface of Mars and talk to people as if we are astronauts in the future on the surface of Mars. And so our prompt today is something I actually learned from a doctor backstage at a comedy club, which is a little thing you don't hear about astronauts very often, but astronauts try very hard not to burp in space. No space burps. It's a big rule. So Ginny, would you like to tell us why astronauts try not to burp in space?
Sure, I can go ahead and do that. If I remember correctly, it has to do with gravity and the fact that usually when we burp, gravity holds down all the goopy wet stuff that's in our stomachs. And in space, that doesn't happen. So all the burps are wet burps, and we all know how terrible those are. And I imagine astronauts probably just don't want to deal with that at all.
Yeah, super gross. Super duper gross. And wet burps are not only gross, it can be a problem. There's another thing about astronauts is every astronaut that has ever gone into space has experienced space sickness. And Andrew, would you like to tell us a little more about space sickness?
Sure. So space sickness, are we talking about the social, mental aspect, or are you talking about physical illness?
Oh, I meant physical, like motion sickness, but backward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot that we take for granted about gravity and the way that it affects us, and one of them is the fluids in our inner ears, which are responsible for our sense of equilibrium and balance, and the way that flows. Without gravity pulling that liquid down, towards the surface of the Earth or Mars or whatever body you happen to be on, that fluid is just moving sort of freely when you're in the space station or something, and so that is very disorienting and takes a lot of time to sort of adjust to that new equilibrium that you're in for 6 months or however long you're on your space mission.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So as motion sickness happens when your eyes are telling you something different than your sense of balance. Like if you read in the car and you get motion sick, it's because your eyes are telling you you're not moving, but your body feels like it's moving and your body's like, ah. And then in space, your body never feels like it's moving, but your eyes will see you floating around and doing somersaults and things. So every astronaut gets nauseous. And Jean, would you like to how about a descriptive stab at what might happen to an astronaut who vomited in a spacesuit?
Oh man, what a horrible description this is about to be. Well, I was guilty of this too. I know there are some people that think that if an astronaut throws up in their helmet, that's immediate suffocation, and that's why they're absolutely terrified of doing it. Really, it's just because it's gross. There's enough movement and air movement and vents in that helmet that they're not gonna die of asphyxiation from their own vomit. But it's just nasty. Then you have to take your helmet off and sanitize everything. So is that descriptive enough for you, Mitch?
Yeah, lovely. That's lovely. And since a space burp, as Ginny was saying, since your esophagus opens at both ends and just whatever comes out in space is kind of like a little mini vomit every time when you're in space. And so actually, even way back in 1969, they've really tried to have low flatulence diets for the astronauts, so they're not producing very much gas. They don't have to deal with that. And of course, burping is only one way that our digestive system gets rid of gas, as we know. And Ginny, with your background in aerospace engineering, I wonder if you have any opinions about what might happen if you expelled gas from the other end in space.
That's a really good question that I've actually never thought about before. We hear a lot about pooping and peeing in space, but we don't hear a lot about what happens if you fart in space. I hadn't really thought about that. Usually they're not wet, right? I don't know if that would change. You see Gene cracking up laughing. I honestly, that's something that I am not entirely sure of. So I would guess that it probably it might be a little similar to, well, probably not, because that part of the body has ways to keep things from coming out when you don't want them to, right? So it probably wouldn't be as big of a deal. It would definitely smell, but you probably just have to be careful.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anyone, Gene, did you want to add something?
I just personally was kind of upset when I found out that you couldn't use your own flatulence to move around the International Space Station. I personally was a little upset. That's all.
Yeah, that's and of course you'd think that you could, right? Because it works very similar to a rocket engine. It propels some gas and then you should go the other way, which in theory would work. Astronauts have tried it. Mary Roach, author of Packing for Mars, talks to some astronauts who did some experiments, but they did them wearing pants. So very little happened. But
yeah,
also,
I was going to say, if there's something in the way that would affect, you'd have to be completely naked. And usually in space, astronauts aren't, right? So
it's true. It's true. And then also there is circulated air on the space station. And so the amount of gas, you'd need some sort of focusing system like a nozzle to really get.
Yeah,
It may
just
work more. Go ahead.
get a funnel or something.
Yeah. But
I'm hearing that there's still a chance that I could accomplish this dream. That's what I'm taking from this conversation. So
if you try hard enough, Gene, you might be able to make it happen.
Thank you.
Follow your dreams.
And it would probably just give you a little push. It'd be more like an ion drive than a combustion engine.
Oh, so you have to do it for a long time.
Yeah, and slowly build up speed. Now, smells are, Jenny, you mentioned smells. Those are a big concern in space missions because they are confined spaces. And so astronaut diets are actually formulated to keep gas down because also flatulence can be flammable, and that's scary in small confined spaces. Not as big a deal on the International Space Station, but on the shuttle missions, that was a big thing. Now, what about sneezing?
It's definitely a big deal on the ISS as well. There are definitely entire, my background is in risk analysis, and there are entire risk analyses about fires and things that can start fires. I don't know if they got down to that level of detail, but I do know that fire prevention is a big deal up there because they are in a pressurized space, and any sort of fire would just completely go all the way through because of the high level of oxygen that they have and all the pressurized containers that when they heat up, they start to, explode. So it's definitely a big deal as well on the International Space Station. It's just not as small of a space, so there are ways to contain it, to like cut it off, kind of like the Titanic was supposed to work, where they were supposed to have those little things that would cut off parts of it. So if part of it filled with water, it would cut it off. That's kind of what the International Space Station is intended to do. Sorry, that was a little off topic.
No, it was totally on topic. Off topic is what we're doing. Yeah. All right.
You said something about sneezing, and I honestly don't know anything about sneezing in space. Do you?
Well, only that is actually generally a more forceful expulsion of gas from your body. And so in theory, you could also use sneezes to propel yourself across the station.
Of course, I'd imagine you'd have globules of mucus and saliva floating around everywhere then.
So they
It's
probably
true.
don't do that. What they probably do is cover their mouths with some sort of cloth so that to
Right.
keep the globules from getting anywhere. Which is
Just
good
like on
practice
Earth.
anyway, right? So
Just like on Earth, you should always
exactly.
cough or sneeze in space. But the problem is, I was listening to an interview with Mike Massimino, who flew a couple shuttle missions, and he was saying that like your body reacts when you sneeze, and so it's very hard to get yourself into like a position like a rocket and then sneeze in such a way that it would propel you forward because your body curls up and the momentum is all messed up. So again, some sort of nozzle on your nose would probably help.
That's it. Either that or just be a pinwheel and be okay with just spinning through the International Space Station.
All right, amazing. Well, that's about our time here for our little experimental discussion. This was super fun. Thanks for joining us, everyone on Facebook Live. And yeah, have a wonderful
Thanks, everybody.
Don't
Thanks.
burp in
Thank
space.
you.